Hi, I'm Steve Pinkney, animation art historian, and I'm chatting today with one of the most famous voices in the world, Noel Blanc. Noel, your dad, Mel Blanc, created the voice of Bugs Bunny, Yosemite Sam, Daffy Duck, just to name a few. How many voices did Mel create?
You know, Steve, he probably created about 1,500 voices because they did about 1,100 cartoons, as you know, because you're such a historian. But not only Warner Brothers cartoons, but Hanna-Barbera and Walter Lantz, Woody Woodpecker, and, you know, from the Flintstones to the Jetsons at Hanna-Barbera and Heathcliff. When you add them all up together, over 1,500 voices.
And he's known as the man of 1,000 voices. But
Yes, it should have been man of 1,500 voices.
you've actually counted about 1,500 voices.
Oh, yes, yes. Amazing.
That's unbelievable. And now I know you picked up doing the voices after your dad. As a matter of fact, you had to take up for your dad after he got into a really a heck of a car accident
Yes,
in the
they-
1960s.
Automobile accident in 1961 it was on Dead Man's Curve, and they didn't think he was going to live at all. He was in a coma for about 14 days. Finally came out of the coma when the doctor looked at the television set that was constantly on in the ICU and said, Bugs Bunny's on there. Mel, can you hear me? No. Bugs Bunny, can you hear me? And the first words that he said after 14 days is, yeah, what's up, Doc? He says, Porky, can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you. Daffy, yes, I can hear you. So he did the whole repertoire of voices when the doctor asked him to do so, and then he remembered everything after 14 days of coma. He knew exactly what was happening, and he was. It was just amazing to watch this happen.
Now, didn't the doctor later ask him what happened there? And he said, well, maybe I've given life to the characters for so long, they decided to give it back?
Back to me. I think the doctor said that, but it sounds like something that Mel would say.
That's really an extraordinary
Yeah.
story. So you had to fill in. You had to really step up and to do his voices then for a while.
For a while, I remember going over to Projection Room 14 over at Warner Brothers and trying to do what he did. I'm not a voice artist as such. I can do, 9 of the characters out of his 1,500. But I had to learn to do them when I was a kid because I was directing him. We worked together for 31 years, so 33 years. But I had to direct him. So he says, "How do you think this would sound?" And I would do it.
Now, that was the first season of the Flintstones, and Mel was Barney Rubble and Dino and a lot of the other Bedrock characters. Did you fill in then?
No, we built a studio in the bedroom underneath. Well, we had the microphones in his bedroom because he was in a full body cast. We had the microphones in the bedroom, and myself and Joe Barbera were 3 rooms away in a little converted studio that we made, and I was punching the tape recorders, and Joe was listening to it. He was producing it, and Alan Dinehart, the director, was in there with all the members of the Flintstones around his bed, which the microphone was draped in front of him. He was laying flat out on his bed and doing shows until 2 in the morning.
So Alan Reed, who played Fred Flintstone, and Bea Benaderet, who
They were
was
all there.
Betty, everybody was crowded around Mel's bed.
Gene Vanderpyle, everybody that was
with
on
Mel
the
in a body cast with a microphone suspended from the ceiling.
show. That body cast came all the way up to here, and his legs were straight out with a bar in between them.
I had read, I think it was a Honolulu paper that said the next day that Bugs Bunny was dead.
Oh, after the accident, when I came down the stairs into the luncheon area at the UCLA hospital, I was reading the headlines of the paper, and the Honolulu paper said, Bugs Bunny dies. Wow. Yeah, it was an unbelievable day.
So I've read stories about how Mel came down from Oregon to try to get a job at the Warner Brothers studio and do voices, and they just wouldn't hire him. And finally, what did you like to say? The guy who was in charge, he finally
He
died.
died, yeah. And Treg Brown, who was a wonderful animation editor and sound effects man. He did both. He was an editor and sound effects. He let Mel come in after Mel 2 years tried with this other fellow, and he said, "Come on upstairs. That was a terrific audition, Mel."
Eddie Seltzer, that was the other guy, the guy who died.
No, Eddie Seltzer lived.
Ah, okay.
No, that wasn't. There was another person that passed away at that time. That was at the gate, we call it. He wouldn't let Mel in. But once the Treg Brown let him in, brought him upstairs. They were having a Christmas party upstairs, and Treg says, "Do your stuff, Mel." So Friz Freeling and Chuck Jones and Mike Maltese and Bob Clampett, and they were all upstairs. And he did a little audition for him during the Christmas party. And they said, "What are you doing next week?" And my dad was thinking, because he was doing nothing, he says, "Well, I think I can make it." What day are you talking about? You know, I think he could make it. So he came in and did the voice of a drunken bull. And that was it. One voice, drunken bull. But then they said, "Well, can you do the voice of this Porky Pig, this character?" So he wallered around in the mud with pigs, he says, which he did, although he had to take a shower, he said, before he auditioned, and did Porky talks with a grunt.
Right, now people think that he stutters, but he doesn't really stutter.
Grunt. It's a grunt.
So when he created the characters, he actually went to hear. How did he come up with Tasmanian Devil?
Well, would you believe me if I told you he went to Tasmania? That's very true.
Really?
Yeah. He went to Tasmania, and he saw these little devils. You know what they look like. They're squirrel-like features with huge teeth and like bigger squirrels than squirrels. And they eat everything. They just gnaw on everything. And he said, it sounds like they should sound like, oh boy, with a low voice and just masticating all the time.
And if you've ever heard a real Tasmanian, it's how he sounds.
Yeah.
He really does.
It does.
Except for the twirl part of it.
It's a little more muffled, yeah, but they do sound that way.
That's unbelievable.
And Daffy Duck, of course, he up at Big Bear Lake, where we spend a lot of our time, we have hundreds, thousands of ducks up there, and they're always, quacking. And he figures that they've got water in their mouth. So Daffy Duck it's not a lisp, by the way. It's a spray. He sprays the water, and that's how Daffy sounds.
Now, I understand that Sylvester is probably closest to his normal voice.
He's salivating. Sylvester is salivating. He's watching Tweety fly around, and he's salivating, and it's that's Mel's normal voice. Flufferin, succotash.
No, really?
Yeah, that's his normal voice. Daffy is up there, but his regular voice is Foghorn Leghorn and Sylvester the Cat.
Well, now, Foghorn Leghorn, wasn't that originally a character, Senator Claghorn, I think, on maybe the Jack Benny show? That
No, it was on Fred Allen's show out of New York, and Senator Claghorn was on the show. But I think the Foghorn Leghorn definitely came after Senator Claghorn's show. So he picked up that kind of a blustering voice from that southern kind of sheriff, the southern sheriff sound.
Well, of course, everybody wants to know, how did he come up with the concept and the personality for Bugs Bunny?
Bugs Bunny took a lot of time, because the drawings of Bugs Bunny originally, which you have seen and have sold it for many years, the drawings of Bugs Bunny were very, very weird at first. He had a very oval head with the nose that came down here. And the first voices, because he had such big teeth, Mel gave him some of the early cartoons you heard, and it was really strange. That metamorphosized into the real Bugs Bunny about 1940, but it took him 2 or 3 years before it metamorphosized into the Bugs Bunny that we all know, because that whole body changed, as did Porky Pig. Was a big fat pig, remember, on the early cartoons?
Oh, yeah, right, sure.
And then he became smaller and cuter and smaller and cuter, and his voice stayed the same. But Bugs, Mel would say, "I don't think anybody can understand me. I think I better take the teeth a little back." So that's why Bugs' teeth are not protuberous.
So he wanted to combine sort of a Brooklyn and a Bronx accent and
Yes.
sort of that
Streetwise
streetwise
New
New York
Yorker.
guy.
Yeah. It's a combination of the streetwise New Yorker most of the time. Sometimes it sounds a little Bostonian, but they all sound pretty close.
Now, a lot of people, a myth has been going on around for a long time that Mel was allergic to carrots, and so he would spit them out when he was done
That's not
taking
true.
a chip. Let's have the truth here.
You try saying something with a mouthful of carrots.
Well, I just happen to have it now. But so
When
he
you take a
wasn't allergic.
carrot and start to chew it, it takes a long time before you can chew the carrot.
Didn't he try a couple of other vegetables first, like a potato didn't work?
That
and
didn't taste real good either.
Okay.
Tried celery, and no, nothing sounds like a carrot, and it's because it's so crunchy. So when he ate the carrot, he was supposed to go, stop tape.
What's up, Doc?
Well, now, Noel, I know your wife, Catherine, is a celebrated and award-winning children's book author.
Oh yeah, 13 or 14 books already.
I've seen them. I've seen them before I knew who she was, really. But now she has written a book about Mel's early life, discovering the talents that he had and coming up with the voices and getting into trouble, called Melvin the Mouth.
Yeah, it's like when he was 9 years old. Took a long time to get that book out, but it's a wonderful, wonderful children's book. But when my wife says, "Well, it's for children from 7 to 16," no, it's for everybody. This is a book that everybody's going to like. The art is so brilliant in it, and the story is Mel as a child, because he got into a lot of trouble in school. He got a lot of trouble with his folks by making sound effects when they shouldn't. But it turns out really well because he became the man of 1,000 voices. But he had to go through a lot of painstaking times at school, because he would be. When you open the book, you'll see.
Well, this is where he learned his talents and became the soundtrack of our childhood.
Yes,
really,
yes.
But gosh, I remember you telling stories about how he would imitate. He would create the voice of Woody Woodpecker and run up and down the hall.
Yes, and the book covers that.
And didn't he got like expelled or suspended because he was
He got kicked out of school for a few days because the voice, the that he would do down the hall would resound, and he ran into the principal. It shows here, and he was a devilish little kid.
Well, now they'd probably give him Ritalin.
Yeah, that's right. They didn't know from then. But he was a devilish little kid. But he was always great to his parents, although he couldn't shut him up because he was doing all kinds of vocalisms. And he did that in Portland, Oregon, for a long time.
Well, now he was a band leader in Portland.
He was the youngest orchestra leader in the country at that time, full orchestras, 30, 40 pieces. He was a 17-year-old orchestra leader at that time, and he also played tuba and bass viol, the bass violin.
Wow.
The string bass. So he was a musician. People don't realize he could sing with perfect pitch. If the notes were written, the lead sheet in front of him, he could sing perfect pitch as Bugs Bunny. But if you could say, could you do 3 or 4 parts harmony with Porky Pig, Daffy Duck, Tweety, he could do 3 or 4 parts harmony.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable is right. You could sit on the piano and he could tell you what keys you were sitting on, because he had perfect pitch. So all those songs that Bugs and the gang did, all he needed was just a lead sheet or just knew the song and he could sing it. Yeah, amazing.
It's really unbelievable.
He has a library of about 500 songs that we did for Gadgets, which was a restaurant chain that Warner Brothers created in the 80s.
Well, I remember, and I still have some of the little 45s that I think you produced with Mel, for Mel. You were, kind of the business end of, and Mel was the talent. And they would be like happy birthday records.
Oh, yeah.
And
A lot of those kind of things. I think we did Happy Birthday to 800 names. Mel had to do 800 names, and then when Mel passed away, they had me do 800 names as the characters again. So we did 1,600 different names.
Wow.
And you could call in for birthday grams.
just as a, as a curiosity, there were probably many products that were made with Mel's voice. As a matter of fact, some years ago, I remember the famous tribute piece "Speechless," with all the characters with their heads bowed and the microphone with no one in front of it. That you did a mechanical piece that had louvers, and it would turn and show different scenes.
And Mel's voice would come
Mel's
out of it.
voice.
Yes. The Speechless poster was the largest selling poster that Warner Brothers ever did, except for Boys to Men Beat It Out,
Really?
the singing group, Boys to Men. But it was the largest poster that Warner Brothers had ever done.
Was still the most popular piece of animation art ever made. And I know that we have sold the original that the lithograph was made from. And the fellow who bought it tore down the wall above his fireplace, and he built the piece into the wall so it was never going to go anywhere.
Oh, is that great?
That's right. I know where that is, but it's not going anywhere.
That's the sheet with the cells on it? Yeah, the original.
Beautiful artwork, right? Yeah, you've signed a few of those too.
Oh, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 of those.
Yeah, but Melvin the Mouth, just I think it's going to be a children's classic. It's going to be as popular as any Dr.
And Random House is the senior publisher on that. So it's available everywhere, every bookstore and Amazon, every place. You can.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you a little bit later, because we want to talk about animation art too, that I'm going to give a number where people can call up and you're going to sign, you and Kat are going to sign the book. And it's a first edition, and it's just a wonderful premium for anybody who gets their first piece of animation art. Whether it's going to be Speechless or a $20,000 Snow White piece, they're going to get Melvin the Mouth signed, because they're not available online or in the bookstores with your guys' signatures on them. So that's soon to be a major collectible in itself. But let's talk about animation art for a moment. You and I have been speaking about all the old cells of Warner Brothers and Disney and Hanna-Barbera, and I know you're a big collector yourself, and before we thought that they were going to become really so valuable, you and your dad used to give these away to kids on Halloween.
Well, you know that people say, how could you do that? Well, Disney was doing the same thing. When Disneyland opened in 1955, is it Futureland? That's what it was called. Tomorrowland.
Yeah.
Tomorrowland, there was a little booth there. They were selling the cells. I remember them vividly walking through there at $1 a piece for all the great Disney original cells, for $1 a piece.
Right.
So yes, what an investment.
Now, I've spoken to people who have bought a cell of Snow White or Pinocchio back then for $1, and now are worth like $10,000 or $25,000.
You know something? My dad used to give out all these original pieces of art to all the kids, because they used to throw them away at Warner Brothers after they'd do a cartoon, which would shoot one cell 24 frames a second. So you add 24 times the minutes, 7 or 8 minutes, times 24 frames a second.
Right.
When they got through, they were piled up with celluloids with the artwork. They were piled up with cells, more than knee-high, chin-high. So they would take them back to the back and either wash them, or if they were really utilized with a lot of fingerprints, they would just burn them.
Right.
And my dad would say, can you give me a couple of hundred cells for my Christmas cards? And they gave him hundreds of cells that he'd make up. He and my mom would make his Christmas cards. But kids used to come to the door, I would say, every day when I lived with them, every single day. And that went on for years. And they'd come by when they were young kids in the 50s, and then they'd have kids, and they'd knock on the door and say, Mel, remember you had the cells that you were giving us? They'd come by in their Ferraris after they sold all the cells. The kids used to come every day. But on Halloween, now you're not going to believe this, he'd get 2,000 kids. Started about 1 in the afternoon and go until about 10 at night. Because their friends would bring their friends, and their friends would come in buses, and it was lined up all the way down his Pacific Palisades.
Were you on the map of the Hollywood stars? Where the
When
tour
I-
buses would come by.
When I moved into Beverly Hills, yes, we were. or I was, because Mel was still in the Palisades, but I'm sure that he was there too. But they all knew where he lived because he was mayor of the Pacific Palisades. So they'd all come for honorary mayor. So they'd all come for cells, and he'd give them away and sign them. Then he decided he'd better sign just autographed pictures when the cells became worth a lot of money. And but all the people that got Christmas cards those years, 200 and 300 of them he'd send out, they kept all their cells. So all the people that are lucky enough to get good Christmas cards from my folks have original cells. Which is
You know, and we've been talking about the animation art for more than 20 years. You know,
yeah.
at the gallery, you know, we have gotten some great collections of vintage Disney and Warner Brothers. But as you say, the studios used to just destroy them. As I understand, since Disney and Warner Brothers were both in Burbank, the fire departments would come around to the studios and they'd say, you have to get rid of these cells and drawings. They're flammable. You're not going to be able to get any insurance at all. And the studios would just mass annihilate them. They would burn
them
and
up.
bury them.
That's why Mel was able to get a number of sheets or cells each year for his Christmas cards.
Yeah.
They did that for 20 years, their Christmas cards.
And then later on, they've the artwork has turned into like the biggest art collectible in the U.S. Actually, I've heard people say that it is the one of the original art forms that America had contributed to the fine arts.
Yes.
But
Well, when people get interested in animation art, they really become interested. I know there's a new car dealer that's east of Los Angeles, and in his office is nothing but incredible pieces of animation art, especially Warner Brothers. He loves it, and just all over the office. And then a new restaurant opened up in Big Bear called the Black Cat, and in one wall is all of Mel's stuff, including a wonderful mural of the boat called Bugs Bunny, our boat up there, the old Chris Craft, and the entire scene of Big Bear with all these great pieces of art in the restaurant.
Now, speaking of your boat, you know, I've got to ask you about this question. When you were a kid, I don't know how old you were, but there was a day that you met Elvis Presley.
Well, I was older
really,
because Elvis was doing a film up in Big Bear called Kissin' Cousins.
I remember that.
62, 63. And he found out that my dad was honorary mayor and decided, our phone is still listed in the phone book, and he decided to call Mel. So he gets on the phone, as I don't know how he did it, but he got on the phone. We get a call around 11 o'clock, and I pick up the phone, and he says, "Hello, this is Elvis Presley. Is Mel there?" And I go, "It's one of those guys, Dad. It's either Elvis Presley or Peter Fonda or Henry Fonda, Jimmy Stewart. Everybody's doing imitations. And, of course, this guy's doing an imitation of Elvis Presley." And he says, "Okay, let me talk to him."
So it's
I says,
another one.
"Elvis, can you hold on for a second? Here's Mel." Give it to the Mel. Push the speakerphone button down so I can listen. That's when the speakerphones were in the big phone. And he says, "Hi, this is Elvis. I'd like to come down and see you, Mel." So I said, "Ask him to come down." He says, "I'll be driving a black Cadillac convertible. I'll see you probably about 10, 15 minutes. And my dad said, "Oh, sure, Elvis. That's going to be fine." So we keep our eyes on the driveway because we're facing the lake, but we also have some windows that face the driveway, which is a long driveway that comes in. And about 15 minutes later, a black Cadillac convertible rolls down the driveway. Elvis jumps out of the car. My dad jumps outside. They grab each other, hug each other. He says, "Hi, Noel," because I knew him from before. "Hi, Noel." That was it. That's all I got.
Wow.
He says, "Let's go sit on the porch." We sat on the porch to look at the lake. He's talking about how the film is coming. He's having Mel do this character. Mel do Bugs. Mel do Porky. Mel do He says, "What's that down there? Is that a boat that says Bugs Bunny?" "That's right, Elvis. It's a boat that says Bugs Bunny." He says, "Let's take a ride." So now, if you're a movie star, you always jump into the driver's seat. You never want somebody to drive you. If it's a boat, you jump. So he says, "Mind if I drive?" Mel says, "No. Let me back it out first." So he backs the boat out. Elvis jumps into the driver's seat, floors it naturally. You're supposed to do 5 miles an hour within a certain area. He's floored. We're doing about 45 miles an hour heading to the dam.
Well, now wait a minute. Now you didn't mention that your dad had dropped, was it a 357 Corvette engine into the
Into
Chris
the
Pratt?
boat. Yes, because my little outboard used to beat him, and he put a 327 engine in
So
the
it
Chris
was like
Pratt.
supercharged.
It was pretty fast. Still the same boat. We still have it. So we're driving down the lake. We're doing about 45, 50 miles an hour, and another boat comes by us, just like we're standing still. It goes by us and comes back like this, slows down, and he looks over. Mel looks over. Elvis looks over, and it's Roy Rogers,
Get it. King of the Cowboys?
King of the Cowboys. And he was in Big Bear because he owned part of the large dock, one of the docks that rented fishing boats and tour boats. Mm-hmm. And he was a very known commodity in Big Bear, and he was always on the lake. And he just happened to come up next to us and see that that Elvis was driving the boat, and that Mel was in it, and I was there in the middle, all in the front seat. And he starts going like this, and everybody starts going like that. We slow down, come to a stop, and we must have drifted for about an hour and a half when they told Hollywood stories. And what's just so amazing is because the Hollywood stories, when you think about it, the number one voice person in the world, the number one cowboy ever, and the number one singer ever, were all on Big Bear Lake telling Hollywood stories.
Unbelievable. Now you used to be friends with, all of the stars in the golden age of Hollywood. Jack Benny was, your dad's best friend. Lucille Ball, George Burns.
They'd all
used to
come up
have
Big
like,
Bear.
and used to have like, was it ping pong night at your home in the Palisades?
That was it, and that was in Playa del Rey when we were first there. Moved out of Playa del Rey to the Palisades in 1951. But yes, we had ping pong night. They'd all come out from Hollywood, which at that time to Playa del Rey took 20 minutes, or Beverly Hills, which took 15 minutes. Try driving that now.
Now, I got to ask, one of my favorite stories is Andy Devine used to own a restaurant, a chicken restaurant up in Big Bear, and Jack Benny had visited, and you folks went to the restaurant, and he thought he was going to pilfer some chicken or something.
Oh, he did pilfer some chicken.
Jacket that was
Yes,
too,
Andy Devine owned a steakhouse. It's now it's called the Captain's Anchorage, but it was Andy Devine's Steakhouse at that time. And he also owned a little fried chicken restaurant about 2 blocks away. And Jack Benny loved Andy Devine. We all loved Andy. He was just a terrific. If you remember Andy Devine, the television series Wild Bill Hickok, he was a character called Jingles.
Yes.
But he's a big, heavy, about 300 pounds. Great big guy.
And he had a voice.
Did
that
you ever break a
television
horse,
told-
Andy? No, he said, but I sure bent one. But he really was a terrific guy, and he would always show up at the restaurant, and if he heard Jack was coming, he'd show up also. And we had chicken, and all the platters of chicken were disappearing. And I know I wasn't eating that much. My dad is a pretty good eater, and I know Jack's a pretty good eater. But we had like the second plate coming, and there was a lot of chicken. And he goes, and my dad, what's up, Jack? He says, I'm taking the chicken. Now, he's got a windbreaker on that was just Tavelman's in Beverly Hills was the most expensive men's store in Beverly Hills. And Henry Fonda had given him Jimmy Stewart gave him a jacket, a beautiful gabardine fishing jacket. And he's putting these pieces, wrapping them up in a napkin and putting the pieces. He said, we're going to have a great lunch when we go fishing tomorrow, Mel. And he's putting them into the jacket. Well, that's fine, but when we got home, my mom opens the door and we're walking in, and here's this incredibly beautiful jacket with a grease spot that never came out. And he smelled like chicken the rest of the time he was up there. But we had great times with Jack Benny up there. And his daughter would come up, and George Burns would come up during the winter time. We had to dig our way out in a snowstorm. But we'd have wonderful evenings on the porch listening to these incredible. George liked to sing. He had a terrible voice, but he loved to sing. Jack played the fiddle. My dad played the guitar. Jack's daughter would play the ukulele, and we'd have song fests.
Now, Noel, you and I have spoken over the years about animation art and the cells and the drawings and the artwork that they used to make the cartoons with back in the old days before anybody knew anything about computers. But it was a process where they'd have to make a drawing of Bugs Bunny, and they'd lay a celluloid over the top of it, and they would ink and paint the cells and then film them and use how many per second? They were 12.
24 frames a second.
And each of them had a little bit of a change in movement.
Sure,
So
24
we put them all
frames.
together.
Who knew that it was going to become America's favorite art collectible? Well, who knew that they were going to become so rare and valuable and collectible? But the gallery, Mirage Animation Art, has just gotten one of the best collections that we've ever seen. A vintage Disney art from Snow White, from Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, Bambi, Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Sleeping Beauty, and your favorites, Bugs, Daffy, Yosemite Sam, Marvin Martian.
Marvin.
You know, and if people call up and they could request a catalog from us, we'd be happy to show it off. We're going to give them a free copy of Melvin the Mouth, which is the origin of all the voices for the Looney Tunes characters. Your dad growing up that your wife Catherine wrote. Just one of the greatest future-selling children's books of all time.
Yeah, it just came out.
And you're going to sign it, and Kat's going to sign it as
we'll sign
well.
it, yeah.
I think that's just an extraordinary premium.
How do you say
Well,
goodbye?
I'll say goodbye the way my dad used to say goodbye. And that is, that's all, folks.
That's all, folks.
Subscribe to our channel or visit our website in the links below for the next episode of Mel Blanc's Hollywood on the Noel Blanc Show.